Okay, good morning, well, or afternoon, I guess. Good morning, oh my goodness. Welcome to this edition of KCM Favorites. We're going to look at routines for reasoning, fostering the mathematical practices in all students. I am your host, Dee Crescitelli. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. As always, everything from all of these sessions can be found at the KentuckyMathematics.org website. And you can scroll down and see all the past videos and resources that we've done so far and look at the exciting things coming up in the next couple of weeks. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite books in the entire math canon, I guess, if you will, and that is Routines for Reasoning. It is just awesome. Mine is super well loved, and there's what mine actually looks like. Hold it up for, perspective. Lots of markings, lots of really good things. I've used it in multiple things over the last few years. Why I love this book. We're going to talk about the math practices, which is the subtitle of this book, but really is the focus of the book. And so really, I want you to put into the chat for us, if you're being honest with yourself, how many student math practices can you name off the top of your head? Be honest. Be honest. Are there lots and lots of 8s? I'm hazarding a guess that there aren't. I've lost my ability to see chat now. That's the first time that's happened today. Lots of 4s, only in student language. Oh, lots of now that I haven't forgotten, lots of I have forgotten them because NTI brain. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, because we're not using them all the time. Think about how many you think that your administrators, folks that check on you, how many they can think of, right? Part of why I love this book is it actually gets at really digging into what the student math practices are, because what they are avenues for thinking, avenues for approaching the mathematics that we do. It starts with that math practice 1, making sense of problems and persevering in solving in them. And as I like to say, that should happen in every math class every day. Otherwise, I don't know why we do what we do. Like that should be the overarching goal every day. But then this book does some highlighting on 3 of them. And what the authors call them are the avenues of thinking. It's the way students approach the mathematics, the way we do mathematics, all of us. And those are math practice 2, reason abstractly and quantitatively. Math practice 7, look for and make use of structure. And math practice 8, look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning. And the irony is, in particular, those last 2, 7 and 8, are the ones that we often have a hard time remembering. And they really are lots of the ways that we approach mathematics. So there's some irony in that. So the big reason I love this book is this image. Oh, this image. It really shows how the math practices work, right, in tandem with each other. Math practice 1 really is this overarching, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what we want our students to be doing. But it also gives us ways to look at how we get there, right? Those avenues for thinking are exactly how kids approach mathematics. It's how all of us as human beings approach mathematics. And then the rest of the math practices are sort of helpers for those main ones, right? They're just so interconnected, right? It's not a checklist of us to get through for things. So the authors are Grace Kelemanik, Amy Lucenta, and Susan Janssen Creighton. And you're going to hear me talk a lot more about Grace and Amy because they've continued this work. Susan helped them put this text together and then left to go on and work on some other things. And Grace and Amy have continued to do some work around this. We're going to look at a website before we leave today. And then the process of writing another book to do some additions to this. We start with why routines. And I'm going to be real honest. It's just best to let people who know what they're doing, the people who wrote the book, do it. Amy and Grace do such a really good job of telling us about this. I'm going to let them do it.
So instructional routines are an amazing support for both the teacher and the learner in a mathematics classroom because they simplify what's happening. And I know when I say simplify and we're talking about mathematical practices, that probably sounds like a contradiction. But what the routines do is they hold the activities of the classroom steady. They're the same every time. And any teacher will tell you that what makes the classroom hum are routines, but typically classroom routines don't sit in the instruction. They're routines that get students to the instruction. So routines for handing in homework, starting class, where to put your lunch money, how to line up. Teachers depend on routines to move kids into instruction. And the routines that we work with are actually routines that situate students inside the instruction. So they know what's coming next, what the flow is, so therefore they're freed up to do the hard work of the mathematical thinking. And it's same for the teacher. The teacher knows what's coming next. They're not worried about the next move or the next question they're asking or who's pairing or sharing or how they're working with the students in the classroom. So they're freed up to really pay attention to what the students are saying and doing and then making instructional choices based on that.
Routines describe specific designs for interaction that support learning and thinking, and routines in particular that have supports for English language learners and students with learning disabilities baked in to the routine, then the supports become routine for kids and they're developing the thinking. And those, our belief, and we've seen in classrooms, is that those supports become routine for the teacher and then transcend the instructional routine and bleed into other instruction. So ultimately, if routines are used regularly, we won't need them anymore, because the moves and the supports will be infused into other lessons from a teacher end, and the thinking will have been developed on the student end.
And the mere fact that the routines exist are supports for English learners in particular, because English learners are in a classroom trying to learn mathematics, which is new to them, using a language which is new to them, in a culture that's new to them. So the routines keep the learning, the progression of learning or the actions in the classroom steady, and that's dependable, and very quickly an English learner knows that. So they're not worried about what's coming next and trying to understand what the new set of instructions are from the teacher and what they're supposed to do, because they already know, oh, right, this is the point at which I turn and talk to my partner about what I just saw. And right, what's going to come next is I think, and then I'm going to write my answer down, and then I'm going to share it. So it frees them up to pay attention again to the learning.
And similarly, for students with certain learning disabilities that benefit from knowing ahead of time what's going to happen and having a predictable agenda and having the heads up that things are coming their way, if students benefit from that, the routines are an incredible support for them.
One other cool thing to note on this page is the link is in the handouts. You can download chapter 1 of the book from this site. It's not a free release for me just to hand to you, but you can download it from Heinemann. They want it to be a user by user basis. So I just wanted to let you guys know that is there. There are some core elements that lead through all of the routines in the book. There are 4. We're going to briefly walk through what those 4 are here in a few minutes. But the things that make these tick are these core elements and some guiding principles and things that go. And so we're going to talk through those the next few minutes. One of them is an articulation of a math practice goal. This is really important. We do a really good job all over this country, in particular in Kentucky, at articulating the standards we want, what math it is that we want kids to be doing. But really the math practice, the how we approach that mathematics should also be thought of and majorly worked into our goal setting for our classrooms. We should have math practice goals for our students as well. Then there's individual think time, and you'll notice those of you that were here yesterday for Kelly's book study, some of these things bridge very much into the thinking from that book, because what good math discourse looks like, what good organization of math thinking looks like, there's a theme you're going to see run through several things like that. But individual think time, because people need that. We rush too quickly sometimes in discourse settings to, all right, now turn and talk to your neighbor. Maybe kids needed a few minutes to think first before they know what to articulate to their neighbor. But then there is partner work. This is particularly important for folks that may not want to shout out for the whole class, that don't feel comfortable sharing in group settings. It's easier to phrase that things get started in small groups and in partner work in particular. Then there's some full group discussion of ideas, and the teacher is in charge here of pulling out the main ideas and things that we want to have come out. And then there's a final math practice reflection. And those of you who know me know I get on a soapbox. I literally pretend I'm stepping up on a soapbox and talk about how reflection is a thing we don't give ourselves enough time for in education, and we surely don't give our students enough time for this either. Learning has to settle and bake in, and we need to take a minute and think about, what is it we just did? What is it that I just learned? Why I did those things? What is my takeaway? And one of the things I love about all of these routines is that is built in. It becomes a natural thing to do, to take a few minutes and stop and reflect about what it is I've just done and what I've learned. And those first 5 are sort of the flow of the routines. The way those are done sort of defines what each routine is and what the purpose is. But then there are 2 additional core elements, and those are really threads that run through that make it possible for the mathematics to be something that's accessible by all students, that capital ALL, all. And so the first one of those, the number 6, if we're listing them out, is access through multiple modalities, which means there are ways to get in for students verbally. There are ways to get in for students writing. There are ways to draw your way through. There you can move, act it out. There's lots of different ways, depending on the routine, about access points, right? So that the math is accessible to all the students. But then there's also prompts that go in, and we'll talk about those in some more detail in a minute, but they're math practice focused. We're not necessarily, these prompts aren't necessarily focused on the mathematics. They're prompts to get at the mathematics, the practice, how we're approaching it. This is my favorite quote from the book. If you'll take a couple minutes and just read that. And if you want to put in the chat anything that comes to mind from this quote or anything we've talked about so far. I've highlighted 2 parts of this. The first part, until the regular use of cognitively demanding work. This is a place where I think we have failed students across the board in terms of not giving kids grade level worthy work to approach, and that we've done that to our detriment. We can give kids grade level work and give them opportunities to enter that work. And these routines actually help make that a possibility. But then also I've highlighted thinking about mathematics as interconnected, making sense, and doable. Math is supposed to make sense, right? Math is interconnected. We can't separate math out from everything else that happens in our day-to-day lives. If nothing else, the current crisis has taught us is how very interconnected everything is and how important mathematics is in making sense and understanding the world. And so this book helps us organize classroom cultures where this is a way that kids can actually grow to see math and to see themselves in that mathematics. So we're going to briefly look at the 4 routines that are in the book. The first one is designed to help students develop Math Practice 2, reasoning abstractly and quantitatively. And I'm going to lean in and let you in on a secret. It's my favorite. I love this one. I love this, and some of you know this about me. What you see there on that slide is a visual of what that looks like, an infographic. And one of the cool things that we're able to do for you is to, in your handouts, you get the infographics for all of these and some additional routines that they've worked on post-production of the book. And what the infographics do is give you hints about where you are in the routine when you're doing this routine with students. So it walks you through what it is you're going to do without needing to have the book out in front of you. It helps make that a little bit cleaner, and after some practice, it really starts to flow. But this one is about deciding what the quantities are, things that you can count or measure in a situation, and how they are related, and using that to create diagrams to use for making sense of the problem situation and answering any questions that may come with that. Another routine is connecting representations. I also really love this one. I think it's Cindy Ossie's favorite. It helps us help kids, right, learn to look for and make use of structure, which is crazy important in a mathematics class and in life in general. And you'll see the infographic there that goes with that. This one is very much about making connections in student work, connections between student work, connections between different things they've put into diagrams. And I think it's pretty important to spend time making use of that and helping them do all that connecting of representations. And then another routine helps us with Math Practice 8, recognizing and expressing regularity and repeated reasoning. Again, you'll see the infographic for that, but it looks through sort of what is repeating every time. How did I notice that? How can I make use of that? And then making generalizations of that work, of what we see. And then the final routine in the book is 3 reads. And there are several different 3 reads routines out there in the wild, in the world. This one is very much specifically looking at reading like a mathematician with the goal basically of how to enter a problem and sustain thinking about the problem. And the way the authors envision this one is really as, this is how we teach kids to read the math problems that we give them. And then in doing that, identifying what's important, it helps them decide what makes the best sense and how to approach the problem. So it's sort of a precursor to the other 3. If I know how to read a problem and figure out what it is I'm looking for, that helps me know how I'm going to approach it, and how I'm going to approach that problem then could tie into some of the other routines with the goal of, we want kids to internalize these things. So the best part of these, I think, are these instructional strategies. And these are things that the teacher is doing to help keep these routines going. And so it makes it something that basically becomes a routine for us as educators. It makes it easier to keep this work going. Those are ask yourself questions, annotations, sentence frames and sentence starters, and then what we call the 4 R's: repeat, rephrase, reword, and record. And you'll see some of these things actually tie back again to the book that Kelly did yesterday. Lots of what lives in good mathematical discourse, good getting at student thinking, is pretty standard, just have some different takes on it. So for the ask yourself questions, what those are designed to do is get at the mathematical reasoning we want kids to be doing, basically getting them started getting us out of the way so they stop asking us questions. Basically, it's how they get themselves started and through a problem without us. And some examples of those are, for example, for that capturing quantities, what can I count or measure in this situation? When kids ask themselves and start looking for that, then they start looking for those things. Does this remind me of another problem situation is another question that the routines teach the students to ask themselves, right? So it gives them an approach to the problem at hand. Annotation is where we highlight some important information or the noticings that we've done in solo, in pairs, or as a whole group, and make connections in the student thinking and the representations. And what's important is in these is that the teacher is doing the annotation based on the classroom conversation. So it's pulling the ideas together, but it's also helping students learn how to annotate. This is how we teach them how to do annotation in their own mathematical thinking and how we model that for them. And then sentence frames and starters help us focus on the math practice. And some of you have been in a couple courses that Cindy and I have used some of this in. And, you know, it's the hardest part to keep kids focused on what it is we want them to be talking about. So you'll be asking them to, can you restate what, you know, what Cindy said? And they say, sure, but first I want to tell you what I did. And so what you can do is point back to sentence frames and starters. And so some examples are, we noticed this in the problem, so we looked for something else that we thought would go with that. Or how did you represent, you know, the numbers of this particular thing? And so having the sentence frames to fall back on for the big idea is that it gives students that are struggling for the words to describe things mathematically, it gives them a sentence structure to hold on to. They know for this purposes of this discussion, I'm going to be looking at quantities and relationships. So if I can figure out what quantities and relationships are, I've got a way to get into the conversation. But it also then can get you back on track if you've got folks that want to talk about something else or want to be in a different part of the conversation that we're not ready for. And then the 4 R's are teacher tools, basically, for carrying the conversation forward. So if someone, and I've actually got slides. So if it's possible that folks didn't hear something that was happening in a conversation, then you have 1 or more students repeat, right? The first R is repeat what was said. If the thing that came up was a key part of the lesson, or you want to make sure everybody understands what's going on, or you're not sure what a student has responded if you're not really clear, or you think the class isn't clear, then you can have a student or two rephrase that idea using different words. And it's amazing how much clarification happens when you have folks rephrase. They clean up the language, they perhaps use the math words that you were hoping everyone used in the first place. If there's specific language that you want them, then you could have them reword. Sometimes the teacher might need to reword. If you really do need to get at some precise language, if there's some math vocabulary you need to come out as part of the discussion. And then if there are big ideas, words, images, the punchline for the lesson of the day that you think students would need to see visually, this is when you record, right? We think of it as the residue left over from the conversation. What is it, things that you want folks to remember? And it becomes basically a class created anchor chart of the specific big ideas from this particular routine. Questions? In the book, they talk about 5 strategies. There's 4 strategies, but the 5th one is make it routine. These things only work if you make them routine. It's like when we first started the big push towards number talks, they only become a way that kids approach mathematics if it becomes a routine. So kids learn to think this way and learn to develop much better skills with those math practices if we give them opportunities to do so. So I mentioned that there are extra things in your handouts. They put lots of work into this book and then kept going. And so on the website, Fostering Math Practices, there are all sorts of amazing, amazing, amazing things. And so if you click through, the link is live, although apparently really slow. You'll see all sorts of really good things. Oh, look, I tweeted that I was going to be talking about that, and there it is on the website. But you can look for all sorts of different things about those routines. There are downloadable slides, pre-made slides, so that all you have to do is put in your question you want to ask, and you can download lesson plans, different ways to plan them, a template for putting your own questions in. They've got sample tasks for all of them, and some additional ones that actually don't live in the books. Some great stuff there. They will ask you for your email address, because sort of like us with the KMP Intervention Guide, we just want to have a sense of where people are and they're using things. The Fostering Math folks do too, but you actually get like next to no email from them. They're really good about not spamming or sending you anything. There's some really good stuff here, and some really good information about the avenues of thinking and the thought that went into this. So you can sort of get a behind the scenes look at the thinking that went into all the awesomeness that is the book. And the handouts, I'm super excited. Sandy Cabalon, I'll get her name right in a second. Fun story. So this was part of some what's called the SysEP work. It is some work with the state and some districts in different parts of the state of Kentucky. We're looking through trying to make a really good math walkthrough tool. What does it look like to observe math classes? What is it we're looking for? And trying to get really good observation tools in the hands of principals. And several of us were in a room trying to decide that. And I walked in with this book to say part of the problem is we're only checking off standards. We actually need to look at what kids are doing in math classes. And so I pulled out that handy dandy upside down flower arrangement and said, this is really how the math practices work. They're not a checklist. And Sandy, some of that got to her in her district. So her district in Madison County was one of the districts doing this work. And so they had in-services and meetings and going through trainings about how this works. And she took that image and said, oh, we need this, in our classrooms, and did some really good work to put together some different things that come from that work for the teachers in her district. She's a math coach. And so she gave us permission to share that with other folks. So I'm very excited to do that. If you share those and use those, just make sure that you know where that came from. But I'm excited that I'm able to share that with you. Then the other thing that's in your packet are infographics to make it easy for you to think through some of the different routines. And you have those there. And then you also have access to the website to pull down some resources that aren't even in the book. And then also don't forget that from that page, you can download and start reading the first chapter. If this is a book that you've decided, oh, I might need to get this, the first chapter is there to get you started while you wait for the book to come to you, which I'm very excited about. You can order that a couple different places. Heinemann is having free shipping for right now. And then there's Amazon. And so depending on how you order and what kind of agreement you have with Amazon, how very sucked into them you are, it may be cheaper to get it through Amazon. If you have to pay for shipping, Heinemann might be your best bet, but those will click right through for you if this is a book you want to order for yourself. And that is my very brief, I could talk about this book for hours. If you've got questions, please let me know.
We always appreciate when you share your knowledge, and that book is one that really is foundational here at the Kentucky Center for Mathematics, because you're right, Dee. The video where the authors were talking about the structures that are so in place for our ESL kids, I think about our cities across Kentucky that have all kinds of English language learners. What a beautiful way to know exactly what's coming next. Imagine a child. I was very moved by that. But Dee spent a lot of time and really got some things, did a great job today, and a book that's so rich. How did you do it in 30 minutes? I don't know how you did.
I'm not sure I actually did it justice. It felt like it really did. This was a book talk. This was my, this was my book report. I love this book. I love it. I love it. I love it.
That's fabulous. I'd love for some of you guys to unmute and also tell Dee some things that you found that were powerful in what she was talking about today, and or make a, as always, make a chat, do something, make a comment in the chat box.
I was going to say, do look ahead for the rest of the things this week. There's some other great books coming.
Carrie said that she likes the overview of those mathematical practices. I can tell you that Amy Kellum, who runs a very vibrant math intervention site out there on Facebook, you should follow her. She's already tweeted it, Dee.
Oh, that's fun.
She's already put it out there in Facebook land. So I was able to say that to show that. So
I'm getting some folks to buy it. That's always a good sign. Yeah, I'm telling you, the math practices, that's the part that we left out for several years here in Kentucky in particular. We did a really good job of focusing on the mathematics, but it's actually about what the kids are doing with that mathematics that makes the difference.
It's exactly. Amy put a comment. Amy, go ahead and unmute your mic and talk a little bit about that, because she's right. She said we have amazing resources in this state, and we have, we're really second to none in terms of the support for the teachers. Amy runs a Facebook site. I'm going to look at it. Oh, yes, I hear.
Okay, good. It's just interesting because Kentucky seems so removed from it at the time. And on my Facebook group, Math Intervention Matters, it's amazing how much information is truly coming out of Kentucky, going around the world, and it's just magical to be a part of it. And I always have to get a shout out to Mary Helen Hodges is the person who planted my seed. And none of this would have been possible for me without one lunch conversation with her. And I will forever be grateful to her taking an interest in me being a very non-math person at the time. And she is the person who took that minute or two to talk to me and fostered that relationship, and was the first person to speak the words math intervention to me, and it was life-changing. So
I was going to say, and indeed it is life-changing. So Amy's Facebook group is called Math Intervention Matters. If you are not a part of that, it is a private group, but you answer just a couple questions and you can be part of 16,403 members.
Yeah.
Amy, that is pretty impressive. So we thank you guys for being KCM treasures. Our KCM favorites continues this week. Of course, next up is Cindy Aussie and her book, we call it the infamous Red Book, Developing Number Knowledge, for tomorrow. Math Fact Fluency with Bonnie Davenport on Thursday, and then Taking Action. You got it. Look, Cindy's already given a plug for her book. If you could see Bonnie, she's probably has her book up too also. So, and Leah's gonna wind us up at the end of the week with Taking Action, Implementing Effective Teaching Practices in our high school. Again, encouraging all of our afternoon members to join every day, because we learn something new every day. Thank you. Fantastic session.
Definitely check out the website, the Fostering Math Practices, because there's some great stuff there.
That is such a great website.
Hey, Dee, this is Angie. I have a question. We're interested. I sent my staff a website that had some, examples of a 3 reads protocol, and it was in like a 3rd grade classroom. Do you know where I could go that may have a video that shows an example in like a second, first, or kindergarten classroom?
I would have to go looking, but I will do that.
Well, I didn't know if maybe it was on what you showed us, that Fostering Mathematics website.
Yeah, I don't think they have a video of the 3 reads, but I'm going to go looking for some folks. Most of the 3 read stuff I've seen is for upper level because
That's what I saw.
Independent readers. Yeah, so, but I'll go looking to see what I can find.
Okay, thank you. Because I shared the 3rd grade resource and they really liked it. And they were like, oh, do you have one maybe that's, you know, from a lower grade? And I didn't know if, you know, I don't want you to have to research it, but if you, I didn't know if you, you know. Just
No, I'll go looking. I'm not sure what we'll find because they're assuming probably more teacher. That's more teacher led at that point because you're not talking about independent readers
Okay.
necessarily. But I'll see what I can find.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it.